Hello, everyone. This is Srajan Reddy from C-Level Talk, where we interview C-level executives from various industries and successful entrepreneurs. And today we have Mr. Roger Royce as our guest, and he is a partner in Haynes Boone law offices. Hello, welcome, Roger. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Good. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a lawyer in the Palo Alto office of Haynes and Boone. It's an AmLaw 100 law firm. I work with emerging growth and venture capital. I'm a corporate and tax lawyer, so I form companies, I do financings, M&A transactions, try to help build great technology startups, and work with the founders and also the investors who invest in them.
Okay, great. Great. So, for how long have you been practicing law?
Since 1984, a long
Oh,
time.
that's a long time. Okay, and are you like the partner of the whole organization, or are you the partner only in that particular location
No, I'm
in
a
Palo Alto?
the firm
Sorry.
itself is a partnership. I'm based here, but I'm a partner in the firm.
Okay, that's great. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started with this business? Like, how did you expand to I believe you have 18 locations and in multiple countries. I've seen a location in London and I believe Mexico, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. We're all over the U.S. and then in Mexico City and London as well. Um,
Uh-huh.
I joined the firm 2 years ago. Up until then, I had my own firm, and we brought our corporate team and some others over to Haynes Boone. And here in Silicon Valley, it's part of our West Coast expansion. And Haynes Boone is very well known in its home state of Texas, where its head office is, as well as on the East Coast and some of the other offices. And we're expanding that expertise here to California, in particular Silicon Valley. So that's how I got here and why I'm here. And it's been a really great fit. I think there's some real synergies and there's a real need in the valley.
Okay, that's great. And like, what all kinds of law do you practice at all your locations? Like, are there any specific kinds of law that you do, or you practice all kinds of law?
Haynes Boone is a large firm. It's got a very diverse set of practices. Like I say, my practice is corporate and tax, but I'm surrounded by intellectual property lawyers because this is Technology Valley, and everybody needs IP lawyers. That's patent, trademark, trade secret, copyright, things like that.
Uh-huh.
We have litigators in case things go wrong, or even to advise going into a transaction how to prepare yourself for downside. We have employment lawyers because most companies are going to have to start ramping up pretty quickly with employment. We have regulatory counsel on things like OSHA, FDA, all sorts of regulatory issues. We have securities counsel, we have M&A counsel. So we really are a full service law firm, especially to the business community. My particular practice is focused on the business law aspects of technology startups and the venture capitalists that invest in them.
Okay, that's good. And as an entrepreneur and a lawyer, have you faced any challenges? Like, what are the biggest challenges you've faced, and how did you overcome those?
Well, a big challenge here in Silicon Valley for most law firms, because every law firm in the world wants to be here, for
Hmm.
sure. This is really ground zero for innovation, for a lot of the big things that are happening, for the next big thing, whatever that is going to be. You think about it, it all starts here. And I
Right.
could go on a lot about why this is a place where every major law firm really needs to be, but it is very challenging for a non-native law firm to move into this valley because first of all, it's so extremely competitive, and secondly, the market is different. It just requires. It's in some ways it's a small town. It's very efficient, and things just get done a certain way. And law doesn't get practiced this way every place else. And that is a challenge for other law firms. Hasn't been a problem for us. I've been here for 30 years, so I certainly understand this market.
Okay.
But But I know that sometimes it's a little bit of a culture shock for lawyers coming in from other places. I'll give you an example. One of the things that makes this area so productive is the fact that it's very cooperative. You might call it co-opetition. You might compete with somebody, but you cooperate with them as well. So, for
Right.
example, it's well known in this valley that an engineer from company A will call up his buddy at company B, a competitor, and say, "Hey, I got this problem. What do you think about that?" I'll tell you something. Lawyers here do that too. Now, I started practicing in New York City, and we would never in a million years do that in New York. But
Oh, okay.
here, it's a much more collegial atmosphere, and that just really raises all the boats.
That's great. And I mean, you've told me that there's such a competitive market. So how do you differentiate your company from others? So is there any unique selling proposition? Like, do you have your own USP?
Yeah, in a lot of different ways. But personally, well, let me just give you a couple of things. Let me give you personal and maybe firm wide. But personally, my area of expertise tends to be a little bit different than most lawyers who do this stuff. I come from a tax background, and I look at things in a tax sensitive manner. And a lot of startup companies, a lot of startup company lawyers don't do that because most startups, they don't think about tax too much. If they have a tax, that means they must have made money, and that's a good thing. So let's worry about it when we get there. I don't look at it that way. I, go into transactions making sure that we're going to have a good tax result on the back end. So that's one thing. That's sort of a personal area in terms of differentiation, and it very much is a blue ocean.
Okay.
There's just not a lot of startup companies that kind of approach things the way I do. Secondly, I understand startup culture, understand they work against budgets, understand they work against flexible billing arrangements, and I'm happy to do that. The As a firm, though, one of the things we bring to the table is that ability to scale up.
Hmm.
So I have many companies that started small. They started one guy in a garage, just like you read about,
Right.
and a certain percentage of them get to be unicorns, or they get to be, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not many law firms can stay with a company from the start all the way to the finish.
Uh-huh.
We can't. I mean, I'm generally involved at the start, but since I've been at Haynes and Boone, I'm able to stick with these companies as they get bigger and do their public offering or their de-SPAC transaction or whatever it is, or get into international business, into regulatory issues, things like that. So that's really probably the major distinguishing factor. We're just able to stay with these companies and grow with them.
Okay, that's great. So you said you moved to. I mean, this is like the Palo Alto office is like a new expansion in the West Coast. Like, how did you get your first set of clients? Like, did you go out advertising, or did the clients come in looking for you?
Um, so to clarify, Haynes and Boone has been in Palo Alto for 10 years, but the corporate practice has expanded when we came along. And it had a corporate practice here and a big IP practice, but we kind of brought an expansion to that. With respect to client acquisition, it's it's interesting in the legal business. The way that people build practices is by doing good work. Okay,
Hmm.
and I have clients that have been with me, serial entrepreneurs for 20, almost 30 years since I've been in the Valley. And they acquire a company, they start a company, they build it up, they sell the company, then they go do their next one and they come back. And if you do good work, you're going to see those companies again and again. And over the years, you just acquire more and more serial entrepreneurs. Not only that, word gets around and they'll tell their friends. And, it's mostly referral business, it's word of mouth. It's, it's a much more effective way, I think, of building a practice. I think of marketing for professional services is really, it's got to be brand, it's got to be exposure, and it also has to be expertise. And I think a really good plan would be just to pay attention to all three of those factors, and things just grow pretty naturally from that.
Okay, great. And you are a lawyer as well as a partner in the firm. Like, what do you view yourself as? Like, mainly an entrepreneur or a lawyer? Are you an entrepreneur first or a lawyer first?
Well, everybody in this valley is entrepreneurial, you know, and and I'm a little bit both here because here at Haynes Boone we're doing some really interesting things. I've now got a platform where we can really expand. We're building a startup portal called HB Start that we hope to have out, you know, any day now. That is a resource site for startups. It feels like it's new and interesting, and it feels very entrepreneurial. So now I have been an entrepreneur. I started my own law firm. It was just me, you know,
Mhm.
about 20 years ago, and then built it up, and then joined Haynes Boone. And I went through everything my clients do as an entrepreneur. You know, I had to think about, you know, meeting payroll, and I had to think about the lease and the IT and the furniture, etc. So I understand, and budgeting and cash flow. So I certainly understand my startup company issues. But also as an entrepreneur, I had to think about growth and strategic growth. Um, and I spent a lot of times, I mean, I still, you know, read the Harvard Business Review,
Mhm.
spent a lot of time thinking about how to manage people, spent a lot of time thinking about effective marketing. I spent quite a bit of time about quality control and legal lean Six Sigma. So I thought about all those issues that my entrepreneur clients do. So I consider myself both.
Okay, that's great. So you were talking about marketing. Like, what kind of marketing goes into like keeping your company like constantly? I mean, constant supply of clients. Like, do you do online advertising or newspaper
Uh,
advertising or?
Never, never.
Yeah.
That's the old way of marketing. I Right now everybody is so busy that people are not thinking much about marketing. But I do write a lot. In fact, I just published a book. It's called 10,000 Startups: How to Legal Strategies for Startup Success. My first book was called Dead on Arrival: How to Avoid the Legal Mistakes That Could Kill Your Company. I
Uh-huh.
speak pretty regularly, about every week. I will every week or two, probably every other week. I'll do a webinar on legal issues for startup companies. It's free to the public. I just want to impart knowledge. You should
Mhm.
find me on YouTube. I have a channel with tons and tons of content. I think really good marketing for a lawyer has got to be content based. You know, it's
Right.
content marketing and providing good information. Like I said, we pay attention to all those things. You know, impact, exposure, and expertise. And the expertise is the most important.
Right, absolutely. And when you are speaking on any topic, like you would automatically gain that. I mean, gain that position as an expert in that field. So that definitely helps. And yep,
Yeah,
that's good.
absolutely, absolutely. And now, you know, we're able to go back to live events and seeing people in person and standing in front of live crowds instead of Zoom crowds. And you know, I think that's I've always been very event driven. I really believe in meeting people face to face. You get more of a sense of them, you know, in that scenario.
That's great. And there's a hypothetical question for you. Like, if you had a chance to start your career all over again, what would you do differently?
Well, I probably would have been a little bolder, a little earlier. Um, and that's an odd thing for a lawyer to say because we are by nature risk averse, right?
Right.
I probably would have, well, I definitely would have started my own thing sooner than I did. Uh, and, um, and I probably would have been a little, probably would have scaled a little bit more intelligently. It's really hard as a lawyer to be an entrepreneur and a legal service provider. That's one of the great things about my platform now, is that
Hmm.
I've got marketing people, you know, and I've got facilities people, and I've got people that take care of running a law practice. I can really focus on the legal issues and client service. I kind of wish I'd, you know, done that sooner. But other than that, I think it's been a, you know, it's been a relatively smooth path.
Okay, that's great. And looks like we have 9 more minutes to go. Like, is there any advice that you want to give to budding entrepreneurs or lawyers who are just starting up? Like, let's focus mainly on the entrepreneur side.
On the entrepreneurial side for lawyers who are just starting up, yeah, absolutely. There's a handful of things. This is not entrepreneurial, but they ought to be expanding their skills, their soft skills, and things that law schools don't teach. For example, and also their business skills by reading quite a lot of business books and books about softer skills, such as negotiation. It's just my perception that lawyers are not typically good, are not generally very good negotiators, because we've all learned that you don't have to come to an agreement. You can find a judge to make an agreement for you. Everyone's got that in the back of their mind. It does not, it doesn't really facilitate a, good negotiation. And that's why lawyers always have this reputation as being deal killers. So I think that if lawyers would, I think, just educate themselves a little better on persuasion and negotiation, I think they would find an easier time of it. It's just not something they teach in law school. Maybe it can't be taught. I think it can be. I think we can learn that. On the entrepreneurial side, again, there's just so much that we don't learn. We have to figure out by doing or by observing others. But I would break it down into a handful of really big things. On marketing, everybody should learn about blue ocean strategies. How do you compete in a world as a lawyer, especially a new lawyer? Are you going to try to be just a little bit better or just a little bit cheaper than a competitor? Or are you going to make your competition irrelevant? Read blue ocean strategy. We can apply that to everything in life. Secondly, quality control, because our business, it's probably more important than any other business, is to have high quality. So how do we ensure quality control while keeping costs down? And that's why I say there is such a thing as Six Sigma, as legal Six Sigma. And I think every lawyer ought to learn about, really efficient processes for keeping costs down, but keeping quality very high. So, I'd encourage every new lawyer to kind of focus on those two things. And then the third thing, again, this is not something we learn in school, so we have to figure this out on our own, is just management. And by business management, we typically mean people management. And it's counterintuitive to most lawyers who think like I do. But just try to develop these sorts of skills again through self-education. I think a lawyer who can master those three things, marketing, quality control, and business management, can take over the world.
That's awesome. That's great. And usually, what's your typical work day like? How many hours do you work? And what is the most important part of your day that drives the rest of the day?
Oh, you probably don't want to know. I put in long hours. I'm here 7 days a week, and I don't view it as work. My strategy here is 5 days a week, and they're about 14-hour days, but they're devoted pretty clearly to client service and client work. And then the weekends are for non-client but important things: writing articles, editing, preparing speeches, preparing slideshows, working on networking, working on developing relationships, and that takes a full weekend every week just to keep up, and education, to keeping up to date, CLE, listening to CLE. So it's a demanding schedule, I admit it, but it works for me. By the way, for lawyers getting into this business, just when I first started many years ago, it's one of the first things my first boss told me. They said, "Look, this is not a business to get into if you don't want to work hard." You hear everybody say, "Oh, work smart, not hard," or "Work right, don't work hard." No, you have to work hard. You have to work hard. If you're not willing to work hard, you are in the wrong line of work.
Okay. So is it true for all lawyers and at all stages of their career, or is it like more hard work at the initial stages of the career and later you could relax a little bit, or how is that?
Well, I think I work harder now than I did when I started out.
Okay.
I used to go fishing on weekends when I started. I don't do that anymore.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think, I'm not saying everybody has to keep that kind of pace.
Okay.
Work hard is a relative thing. But I think it's got to be it's more demanding a profession than a lot of others. Let me put it this way: it is not a 9 to 5 job. It clearly is
Okay.
not, and that's true throughout your career.
Okay, that's great. So with all this hard work that goes into it, like what keeps you motivated?
Well, I just love seeing companies succeed and being a part of it when they do succeed. It's really it's really worthwhile to see an idea, to sit in a brainstorming session with a bunch of very smart people, see the idea hatch, help them turn that into a company, help them get that company financed, and then help them exit that company through an M&A or an IPO. And once in a while, those companies change the world. And that's why people are here doing what I do where I am, because we're working on stuff that changes the world.
That's great. That's great. So, do you recommend any books for entrepreneurs?
Well, you should certainly read my two books.
Okay.
Get on Arrival, How to Avoid Illegal Mistakes That Could Kill Your Startup, and the one that is just now actually coming out in print this month. I just finished it, wrote it during COVID. It's called 10,000 Startups, 10,000 Startups, Legal Strategies for Startup Success.
Okay.
Aside from that, yeah, I do recommend a handful. One I mentioned is Blue Ocean Strategy. Everybody should read that. Another one is called Influence, the Science of Persuasion.
Okay.
And, there's a third one. It's probably not even in print anymore, but it had an impact on me. If you can find it, it's called Fame 101, and it's about personal branding. Because even if you're attached to a large organization, everybody has a personal brand, and that's very important. And that book, it's a little dated. I mean, the techniques have changed now, but the concepts remain the same. So those are kind of my big three in business. And then other than that, as an aside, we haven't even talked about this, but there's a personal element in this. People have to take care of themselves. Otherwise you're not going to have a long career, and nobody focuses on that. And I think entrepreneurs ought to be paying attention to themselves. So here's another handful of books you might want to read. Why and How We Sleep, the importance of sleep, because those all-nighters can really take a toll on you. There's another book called Reversing Heart Disease. And even if you don't have heart disease, it's about the importance of and another one called Mastering Diabetes. And even if you don't have those diseases, these books talk about the importance of nutrition. And then The Science of Meditation, the importance of mindfulness. So that would be that's my recommended book list.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Roger. Thanks for being on the show. And it's been, it was a pleasure having you.
Okay. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yep. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.